Rhett, I'm so glad you are here today, and I think it's a phenomenal example of how we can use social media rather than social media using us.
Oh,
Because
I'm
I found you on Instagram, and here you
I'm
are on my
s-
podcast.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because I need as much positive reinforcement and feedback as I can get to keep this social media engine running. It's not something that I particularly enjoy,
Mhm.
but I do enjoy the feedback and the opportunities that it's given me to talk to people like you, especially outside of my normal lane, which is strength and conditioning. So talking about a little bit of a subject that's a tangent to what I do in the day to day is a treat for me. So yeah, I'm glad it brought us together, and it introduced me to your podcast, which is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And so for those of you who haven't checked him out yet, all of his links are going to be in the description of this podcast. And please do, especially if you're a coach, because what brought me to Rhett is the fact that how he has I've just seen volleyball. Is that basically the teams that you work with is volleyball?
Well, for the last 10 years, yes.
Okay.
My formative coaching years was done across the spectrum of sports.
Okay.
I actually was with a sports performance training company that for a while was the leader in training young athletes from ages 8 to 18. I should say that was our bread and
Wow.
butter. And we had 70 centers across the United States. I started in one of those little centers, and eventually I was with that company for 12 years, and I rose up to the ranks of the director of performance for the whole network. So for
Wow.
the first decade of my coaching life, the thing that I would give presentations about at conferences would be the art of coaching young athletes. And it was
Okay.
only when I got this cool opportunity before the London Olympics, I got a cool opportunity to go over to China to train the like a ton of different Chinese teams, kind of their gold medal factories,
Okay.
with a small crew of American international coaches that were hired by this one company that I was a part of. And we, the London Olympics went well enough for the teams that we were with. And you asked the question about volleyball. For the London
Yeah.
Olympics, I was with the Chinese gymnastics team, table tennis, judo, rowing, shooting,
Wow.
archery, like it ran the spectrum of these of teams. So that really got my brain used to diagnosing problems in or commonalities in sport, and also all the differences between these sports, and trying to find like the things that I can do to try to make them perform better for those Olympics. And that went well enough that I stayed in China for the next year and the next year, still working with a lot of different sports. And then before the Rio Olympics, 2 years before, I got hired by the women's volleyball team in China, which, surprising to anybody, probably is the most important and famous team in China. So China
Oh.
is very good at individual sports. Sports like diving and gymnastics and shooting and archery, where they just rack up gold medals. Sports where it's just an individual that practices one thing over and over
Yeah.
again. As you can imagine, the Chinese are really good at anything that just demands hours and hours of repetitious practice. They
Hmm.
don't care about team sports very much because team sports only get you one medal. It's a lot of resources, it's a lot of people for one measly little medal.
Yeah.
So $5 million to the shooting program can get you 11 medals in an Olympics. $5 million to the basketball team might get you one.
Right.
So that's all to say, I'm with this Chinese women's volleyball team, which is the only team sport, men or women, that has ever won a gold medal in anything, a world
Mhm.
championship, an Olympics, a World Cup, anything. And so we went to Rio and we actually won a gold medal there. And that has pigeonholed me into women's volleyball ever since. It becomes a little silly for me to leave women's volleyball while after enjoying that
Yeah.
great run with the Chinese team. But I bounced from China to the Netherlands, where my daughter was born, to Germany, and now I'm in Turkey working with the team here. So it's opened up a lot of potential for me to move around the globe and have
Yeah.
adventures.
What amazing opportunities. And I mean, I'm biased towards women's volleyball because that was my sport. So thank you. Thank you for sticking with it.
Well, I mean,
And,
I have been, as I said, I've been a part of a lot of sports, and if
mhm,
you have to endure a year worth of or a season worth of watching practices, you could do a lot worse than women's volleyball. If you've
right?
ever been to a shooting practice, mind-numbingly boring. So I know what a great gig I've found.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm curious about your no zombies kind of what framework is that what we're calling it? What do we
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Like,
Yeah,
so
that
how did you come up with this? What is it? And how did you come up with this concept? And was it after spending kind of like those crazy hours that were really monotonous and like you're kind of observing these athletes doing the same thing all the time and not maybe getting as too much joy out of it? Like where did it come from and what is it?
Yeah, and as I said, I've worked with corporations. Like I've been part of a corporation that has its own corporate philosophy on how to train athletes. And when you
Yeah.
have either a franchise or in the case of China, if China has hired this company to come over to China and train their athletes, you are obligated to kind
Yeah.
of do warm-ups the way that country or that company has sold the Chinese Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
And so there are certain, you're just bound by a couple of things when you're doing that. There's a tried and true method that almost all coaches use. You do a little soft tissue work like with a foam roller, things that your audience probably knows about, and then you get the tissue warm by doing crawls and skips and jumping jacks and things like that. And then you stretch a little bit. You put the athletes through a range of motion that they'll get into in their sport. And then maybe to top it off, you'll do something a little faster, maybe some jumps or some what we call like rapid response, quick feet drills that
Mhm.
your audience might be familiar with. And that would be a menu for a solid warm up that 99% of coaches kind of use in some iteration or another. But in my experience, especially working with young athletes before, I came to realize that, occasionally when I would get tired of doing the same jump rope routine to get them warm, and I said to my coaches, I'm like, hey, don't tell corporate, but today we're going to play knockout basketball to get them warm. And so we're going to have line them up at the free throw line, two balls, and you're trying to get the person in front of you out by making a basket before they do. And when we would do that, the place would be electric. The athletes would be coming in the next 2 weeks asking, can we play knockout again for warm up? Can we please play knockout again? It got them just as sweaty as the jump rope
Yeah.
stuff did. It added just such a vibe, and it was competitive, it was reactive, it got them warm. And so that always stuck in the back of my brain as I then went on to China and I started training them with this other company. Now, when I left that company, all of a sudden the restrictor plates were off. And I thought, you know, why am I sticking to this kind of small library of pre-approved warm-up things, right? Why am I doing these same crawls and skips and jumping jacks that just everybody knows, when all I really need to do to keep my athletes safe is get them warm, is get their tissue temperature up. And there's a ton of ways I can do that that are either more fun in the way of playing games like knockout, or just working on whatever is the biggest weakness of my team at that time. I just really rebelled against this idea of repetition as something that needed to happen in warm up. There's certain sports like the Chinese are great at where repetition is a necessary part of it. But in sports like volleyball, a lot of team sports, there's creativity and problem solving and having to kind of expand your movement library in order to be a more effective player. And if that is something that we need, I thought, why isn't warm up the place where we're exploring those movements? Why isn't that the place where
Yeah.
we're trying to make my slow team faster or trying to make the team that has a hurt shoulder and make their shoulder feel better? What I don't want is for it to be repetitious. I don't want the athletes to know what's happening that day. I want them to come in and be like, what are we doing for warm up today? I wanted that same energy that I got from my athletes back when they would come in asking for knockout basketball. I want them to know like
Yeah.
why there are balloons in a bag over on the sideline. Like I want them curious and excited, and I want to get them uncomfortable. I want to kind of explore the outer messy edges of their athleticism. And warm up became the place to do that. So to answer your question, to circle back to the thing you originally asked me, I I think I must have made a reel about it really early on where I said my philosophy is that I don't want athletes who can sleepwalk through all the familiar beats of a warm-up like a zombie. Because
Hmm.
even when I had these athletes, like our warm-ups back in the day were super varied. I mean, I have 150 jump rope variations. I have, you put an agility ladder in front of me, I could fill up 2 DVDs of awesome agility ladder drills. And so there was variety within that, but not like taking a big step back and saying, well, why don't we put this stuff away and explore some of the 50 tag variations or explore why aren't we playing other sports during warm up? Like we always are encouraging parents to get their athletes into a ton of different sports, but why aren't we just using it as a warm up as a
Yeah.
time to get my swimmers playing a racket sport or get my tennis players having to kick a ball around? So I'm
Yeah.
going to stop talking right now because I realize I've been ranting.
No, I
But that
love it. It's
question
so
near and dear,
good.
my philosophy for the no zombies thing is near and dear to my heart of keeping things stimulating for
Yes.
athletes just from the moment that practice starts.
Yes, and I don't worry, you're here to rant. That is what you were
I
here for, Rhett.
appreciate that. Safe
But no,
space.
there's so many important pieces in that. And like I'm coming from the athlete's perspective because I played on so many teams where we did the regular warm up that every team at the tournament was doing. And I was always bored out of my mind. And I was one of the top players on the team. You know what I mean? I got recruited nationally, whatever. And I was bored and I didn't want to be there. But
Yeah,
I loved volleyball and I loved my sport, but it was just like it didn't get me into the mood that I needed to be in to then be excited about either learning and bringing skills in during practice or into like just being excited to take on the competition and ready to go. Because I think that I think that maybe there's a little bit of a like communication or maybe it's been pushed to the side about how much like your energy and your attitude and your mood actually have to do with how you excel, how you train, how you don't even get like injured sometimes and like all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't have science behind that, but just me as a player showing up. And then I go and play on a team where we do this stuff and we're like playing butt tag and running around and laughing and dancing and like we played this. Do you know what touch 10 is if it's volleyball?
no.
Oh my gosh. Touch 10 was like my favorite thing. The coach, there would be two people on the court in defense, and the goal was to get 10 balls over the net, but both players had to hit it. Like there had to be 3 hits before it could go over, but it could be hit anywhere. They could be slamming it, they could be tipping it, they could whatever. So everybody is scrambling and diving and trying
That's
to
great.
touch the ball and whatever. Like by the time you got your 10, you came off, you were just drenched in sweat and it was like crazy competitive. And it was so, so fun. And the whole team is like shagging balls and cheering and like everything is into it, right? And it's like, we're ready now. Like just warm, good to go. And it was such a difference. It made such a difference on how we as a team showed up as a team and as we showed up as individuals ready to learn and ready to compete.
Yeah, you've touched on a bunch of really good stuff there. The part about, you know, the almost compliance, I guess is the word, where I don't think that enough coaches really put enough thought into making their athletes in every facet of training really want to come back. Like
Yes.
I want athletes to enjoy the warm up, not just see it like flossing your teeth, something you just got to do to get to the fun part.
Yeah.
That that's a miss. All I have to do is get your tissues warm. Shame
Yeah.
on me if that's boring.
Yes.
Like, shame on me for not thinking. And by the way, and also not using it as a time to maybe work on these fringe skills
Mm.
that can result in more wins in volleyball. Like
100%.
yesterday, I had created an obstacle course that I just thought, okay, for this first section, we'll get everybody in teams, and everyone has to one-armed pass with their opposite hand to their partner from this side of the court to the next before you have to sit in a chair and set here, and then you have to, you know, take the other arm and pepper it back and forth, and you put it into a ball basket. Then somebody has to kick it out, and you have to keep it going, and eventually we have to set it through a setter ring. But all of these things, not all, but certainly it is good for volleyball players to learn how to pass well with one arm, or to be
Yes.
able to hit a ball opposite handed, or to be able to set a ball very long distances. And
Yeah.
maybe coach isn't necessarily have the time to work on that during practice. Why can't I work on that in warm up? And
Yeah.
as a strength coach, the coach is happy to see that I'm not doing jumping jacks. I'm working on long setting today. Oh,
Yeah.
that makes him want to buy me a beer after practice.
Yes.
So this is all, it's a win-win, because the athletes would much rather, you know, be sitting in a chair trying to, you know, kick a ball into a basket and then run around. You know, they'd be happy doing that obstacle course instead of the same warm-ups they've been doing for years and years. My coach is happy we're working on tangential, like volleyball adjacent skills.
Yes.
And I'm happy that I'm seeing smiles and laughter. I'm seeing competitiveness, right?
Yeah.
There's no sleepwalking. I have to worry about the girls cheating because they want to win so badly. Like, that is my biggest problem here in Turkey, is that I have to spend hours thinking through all the ways my athletes will cheat when I'm not looking in order to win a warm-up game.
Yes.
And so it is it's the fun part of it is
Mhm.
really, really important, that you said that you go into that with that mindset. But don't also forget that in volleyball, you can tell which team just won the last point by the team that's smiling. You can
Mhm.
tell which team, right? They all come together in their little huddle, and half of them are like, hey, that's all right. We'll get the next one, okay? All right, don't worry about that. We put that in the past. And the other team is bouncing up and down, smiling and screaming their head off.
Yeah.
Well, why not try to manufacture that same psychological feeling before the match has even started, before practice has even started? Why not start celebrating? Like, I just I always thought that was a little bit of a miss. And so
Mhm.
when I was able to start programming for myself, I'm like, oh, let's find as many ways to make what I do a place that we celebrate, and we fail a bunch. Like the things I've
Yes.
described, they are terrible at. I just made a post about the amount of times, especially I'm here in Turkey with a brand new team. I've only been with them for 6 weeks. And the amount of times I say, warm up today is going to be this, and I spell it out, and a girl will say, that's impossible, coach. We're never going to do that. That's impossible. We simply cannot do it. And sure enough, they can't for the first 5 minutes, but they keep trying, trying, trying. And then they score, and then they figure it out. Some other girls see the strategies that worked, and now everybody's scoring. And
Yeah.
so, gosh, how many years I wasted doing jumping jacks and 20 jumping jack variations when I could have been making my athletes great problem solvers.
Mm.
And that's what it's about for me now, is finding new ways to do that.
Oh, that's so powerful. Great problem solvers. And it's so true. Like setting up our athletes in situations in which they fail over and over again until they figure it out and they realize that their life is not over. They are not a terrible player. They're not, like, all of these fears that come into play when failure is on the line or making mistakes is on the line. And then all of a sudden you have that in a game situation and somebody makes a mistake and you lose the point and like whatever, and they all know, well, this is okay because we've done this a million times, and they bounce back so much quicker. And like that is one of the biggest things that I talk to my youth athletes about, right? Their age is like 11 to 24 kind of range. And it's like fail faster so you can figure it out faster, and fail forward, right? You're going forward, it's okay. And what the difference is between, great or good athletes and the great athletes is the time in which it takes for them to bounce back afterwards.
Mm.
But that time isn't going to get shorter unless we continue to put them in situations that equip them and empower them to fail and bounce back. And that's
Yeah,
what these drills are.
this is so in line with my thinking, because it is that failure. It's making warm up a place where we are all going to fail. I'm
Yeah.
dealing right now. My team is filled with superstars, girls that are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars because they're so good at volleyball. These are Olympic gold medalists. And and they're not used to failing on a volleyball court. They're not used to looking silly.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful when I discover that these girls are terrible at throwing a frisbee and they will be apologizing and sweating and falling down. And they know, okay, and maybe they even are self-conscious about it. Maybe it's something they're like get frustrated about. And that's absolutely possible. But they'll come to realize that today's frisbee day. Tomorrow is crazy rope flow day. The next day is going to be hula hoop day. That's going to be my day because I'm great at hula hoop. But that's not going to be Cheryl's day. She's garbage. And everybody has their days, right? But we're
Yes.
all still exploring movements.
Yeah.
We're all still practicing failing. We're all practicing being vulnerable in front of each other. We're practicing making fun of each other. We are coming together as a team to support those of us that stink at something that maybe doesn't even really matter to volleyball. And
Yeah.
it's all powerful. It
Yeah.
all matters in creating team camaraderie. Like
Yes.
these girls gel over a mutual dislike or frustration with one game that I might have proposed,
Yeah.
or how great they did at this silly challenge I made them do 3 days ago. So
Yeah.
it has been it's really wonderful, and one of the great parts of my history is that I've gone from continent to continent. I've been with a bunch of national teams, and this has not failed. So even with a Chinese team that is regimented and as coaching staffs that you would think would just be very anti duck duck goose,
Yeah.
like they love it because it's been a throwaway for them for decades,
Yeah.
the warm up. And they see that the athletes are smiling and laughing and competing, getting sweaty. That all contributes to a better practice. And
100%.
so and so at every level, I've had, I don't know how many head coaches in my time, but I've probably had a dozen head coaches. I've not had one that didn't absolutely love this approach.
Hmm.
I get a lot of people say, well, my head coach would never go for that. It's not true. Then you're not implementing it well. Because, and I'll just say this, so because also it can't be just pure fun for fun's sake. It also needs to be accomplishing something. Like I
Yeah.
said, with the one-handed passing or
Yeah.
long setting, or if our team is slow, then my practices need to have games that require maximum acceleration. Then maybe it's relay races every other day because relay races are a great way to get girls used to running at max speed. And
Hmm.
so and so I will continue to make practice different every day, but different can sometimes mean that it looks like a rehab session or it has elements of physical therapy in it because physical therapy is the most important thing for my team at that moment. And so
Yeah.
it's not always super fun, but it's always different. But of course I endeavor to make it a place where athletes are smiling, failing, feeling vulnerable, and achieving.
Yeah. There's a couple of pieces in there. Then, first off, I think that this plays into, pardon me, the importance of not doing the same thing over and over again just because it is like your sport related. So we have so many kids, let's say they take hockey players. I'm Canadian. Okay, so let's take hockey players.
Hmm.
And these hockey players are starting hockey when they're like 3 or 4 years old. And then they're going through their whole life doing the same hockey drills, doing the same, like, because it's all to get to this goal of, whatever, NHL or whatever that is, DEL. And what I've been learning is that that's burning out your muscles. That's burning out those it's not necessarily strengthening them because you're using them all the time. And then the muscles that are on the other side of that or whatever, you can tell I have a science degree,
You're doing great.
theology all day long. No, but right. And so I've had multiple like movement coaches, strength and conditioning coaches on here saying, no, it's really important to play other sports because then you're developing those muscles and those motions and all that kind of stuff that are going to balance it out. But here you are just incorporating that into the actual sport practice. And so they don't actually have to play a different sport because you're mixing it in.
Yeah, I supplement. For exactly that reason. And that's the problem with the way warm-up's always been done, is that it's been done and it's been successful. And there's
Yeah.
inertia there, right? It's
Yeah.
just people, it's easy to stick with what you've already done, always done, because in many instances you've won championships with that same old boring warm up and it was great. But for me, it's just a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Strength coaches always wish they had more time with their athletes, but are happy to throw away the first 10, 15 minutes of practice doing the same thing they've always done. They'll come to me and say like, "Oh, I wish we had more time in the weight room. I wish we had time to do speed work. I wish we had time to do agility sessions, but my head coach doesn't let me." I'm like, "Turn your warm up into all that. Turn your warm
Yeah.
up into mini strength sessions. Just don't keep, to your point, like don't make it just more hockey
Yeah.
necessarily. If you're going to make it more hockey, make them play with their opposite hand. Like make
Yeah.
them only pass using their skates. Make them only skate backward. Like whatever it is, you
Yeah.
need to constrain the rules of hockey to a place where they're getting different adaptations and exploring different, coming up with movement solutions to the
Yeah.
problems you've created for them.
Yeah.
And that's a great place, a warm up being a great place to explore that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I am totally with you.
Yeah. And then the other piece of that is here we are, we just talked about kind of like burnout of the muscles if you're just doing the same thing over and over again for years, but it's also burnout of the mind. If you show up and your like mind is just doing the same thing, kind of like how I said, I was just super bored. Like I was super bored and I got burnt out just in my brain from going and doing the same thing. But by them showing up to practice and not knowing what is going to happen today, that's like that's a principle that friggin' people use on these social media apps that give you points and ding and like all that kind of stuff at random times and you don't know when. And like it's literally the same concept that people show up, they don't know what's going to happen. And that keeps them on edge and it keeps them coming back with excitement, with curiosity. What's going to happen today?
Yeah, that's you've touched on two things that I want to highlight. One of which is this idea of burnout that you mentioned, but in Adam Grant is a guy who's written a couple books now, and he has a book that's called Think Again, and he has a whole chapter on this idea of bore out.
Yeah.
That burnout is kind of a physical thing, right?
Yeah.
And but bore out is a psychological deadening that comes from doing the same thing over and over again. And how the best coaches find ways to make the necessary repetition not repetitive. Find
Hmm.
ways to your second point, gamify their
Yes.
training to a point where there are rewards that come at odd times, that there's little bits of accomplishment along the way, that there is unpredictability, that there is social pressure, right?
Yeah.
That there are achievement buttons and leadership boards and like leaderboards and things like that are tried and true methods that app users have been using or app developers have been using to keep us glued to our phones, all of which I try to employ constantly. I don't know, famously, but most strength coaches hand out individual strength sheets to their athletes when they come
Yeah.
into the weight room. So it's like, oh, okay, this is my workout for the day. And I have a little pencil. And when I finish doing it, I put a little check mark, I leave it on the side, whatever. And then I hand it in at the end and I put it in my computer. I'm like, you are losing a huge lever of gamification by having everyone working in a silo. I
Yeah.
keep all of their programs are all on my laptop, and everyone sees everyone else's results. So that when you like today, when you have to do a spike jump with a 10 kilo bar on your back, I want you inputting the data and I group you next to all the other people that play your position. So you
Mm.
see who is the most powerful middle blocker on our team. And
Yeah.
you see how everyone else is doing. And then when you maybe that social driver isn't working well enough, I'll change it up. I'll pair people together and be like, now it is your cumulative it's like you guys are working together to have the best average jump today. And we'll be
Hmm.
measuring that. And you don't want to let your friend down. So I'm employing that social lever
Yeah.
to make the athletes work harder. And these are all really important tools in a coach's tool belt and probably a parent's tool belt to get
Mm.
your athletes working harder than they may necessarily want to in a
Yeah.
session. A lot of my brain power is spent trying to trick them into giving me intensities that they are not used to giving other strength coaches in a weight room.
Yes. I love tricking them into giving me more. It's true though, and it's so good because it's also teaching them like competitiveness with themselves and each other on the team. Because even though you're on playing a team sport, I think there still is like a healthy level of competitiveness between the players as well, right? Like 100% you need to be able to come together, be totally unified against the other team.
It,
But also, if there is competitiveness within the team, you're always going to be trying to grow, evolve, push each other, push yourself, like all of that.
it's been studied that the best symphonies in the world have symphony members that do not like the other people in their row,
Yeah.
right? You always want to be first trombone.
Yeah.
And and it's that competitiveness that
Yeah.
that just kicks all complacency out of that symphony.
Yeah.
And that if the first trombone and second trombone are friends, then it does not work as well as if second trombone is constantly trying to better first to become first trombone.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and so yes, we want a really delightful, happy family, but I will sow the seeds of competition
Mhm.
everywhere I can. And hey, and I can earn, I mean, these athletes really get along very, very well, but like as long as you're keeping it fun,
Yeah.
the competitiveness is under the surface, you know?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
you make it more about cheering for your partner, but you are secretly hoping. I mean, yesterday in the weight room, we did a balance competition, and girls were actively shouting at each other to try to get them to lose balance because they wanted to win. And
Yes.
that's as long as my weight room is loud, I'm succeeding. Like I no zombies in that weight room.
Yes. I love that. And it's the pursuit of playing under pressure too and competing under pressure. And I mean, this doesn't just start and end in sports. This carries on into life. Like eventually these volleyball players that you're working with aren't going to be playing volleyball anymore. They're just going to be living life and having careers and families and like whatever, all of these things. And it's like what the skills that you are teaching them, sure, you're teaching them through, body movement and strength and all that kind of stuff, but also at the end of the day, they're totally transferable because it's mental training and mental toughness as well.
Yeah, right. And they all have risen to this level of sport because they are competitive. So that's an easy one for me. Like I'm actually not a competitive person. The stuff I do to my athletes wouldn't necessarily work that well with me.
Oh, that's
My daughter has
interesting.
that.
Hmm.
It makes me so happy that my daughter is fantastic at losing. She just is so happy if somebody beats her at Uno or in jujitsu. She's a hugger. She just wants everyone to get along. And I have a little bit of that, but I know that my athletes thrive off of the
Hmm.
competition. And so that is very, very often something I'll exploit. But and something else you mentioned earlier, yeah, that I'm also looking for my warm up to expose them to as many sports as possible. Because if
Hmm.
I can find cheap, Nerf tennis rackets on Facebook Marketplace, I'm buying up all of them, right? I am going to make my athletes play tennis twice a month for warm up, get a
Yeah.
racket in their hand. Like I love all of that because that's where I can kind of bring the team together before I make them compete and want to kill each other.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, like speaking to athletes, it can be hard if your coach isn't somebody who understands this concept of kind of instilling fun into warm up, into practices, and everything that we've been talking about today. What would you say to a young athlete who would really thrive from having access to the more fun way to train? And like how do they go about doing that if their coach isn't on board?
Yeah, and that's a tough question because the coach is in charge. The coach, and if you're a
Hmm.
young athlete, it's going to be really tough for you to change your coach's mind
Hmm.
on on these kind of things. What you could do, I mean, it would be easier for volleyball players because there are examples of athletes that are doing it at the highest level, like the athletes I work with,
Yeah.
and more that are adopting this theory. Like I'm so delighted to see that this approach has gotten traction and is being used not just with young athletes, but really at the highest levels. You're seeing a lot more athletes kind of or coaches that are making their warm-ups more stimulating. And
Hmm.
you know, it is tough if you have a coach who doesn't have, isn't on Instagram and doesn't care about those things, and has probably been successful with what they've done.
Yeah.
Uh, I can say that yeah, there are. Yeah, that's tough. You got to be a good teammate. So you got to go along with it and just hope that you can drip influence. What they do is you tell your coach to listen to this podcast right now. That's what they should do.
Heyo. Totally, totally. And I want to see what you think about what my suggestion to that question. As I asked it, I kind of came up with an answer myself. And it would be that for myself, I just sought out when I was playing on kind of like the quote unquote boring team, I sought out other opportunities to play that I know would bring joy. And when I was in college playing, that was kind of like the quote unquote boring team. I went and I joined a co-ed league that played on Sunday nights, and I would go and play. I don't know if I was necessarily allowed to be playing because they were afraid of injuries and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but I went and I played with men. So here I am being pushed because I've got to keep up to their speed and their strength, and I'm hitting on
Hmm.
their height of net and all that kind of stuff. And I was laughing and I was learning, and playing in that way just like allowed me to bring some joy back into my experience of volleyball. And then I would show up and do the monotonous work, and I would know that my fun in my sport was Sunday nights. Right. And so it was like a different experience, even just outside of my team. Because you're right, we can't control our coaches. They're the ones in charge, and you need to respect that. And then even for like other sports, go shoot hoops, go play some, hockey in your driveway, go for a hike, do other things that are going to develop other muscles and get you going. How do you feel about that?
Oh, well, yeah, it's a great answer. And, I think a lot of coaches might push back on, as you said, you
Hmm.
getting into like playing pickup basketball or something that would make my head coach like break out
Yeah.
in hives thinking about the athletes going to play a little ice hockey on the weekends.
Yes.
But but that's honestly where a lot of sports performance training facilities that do it right are supplementing. Like if
Mm.
you went to one of these places that should be creating better all-around athletes, that it's not just a volleyball specific program, it's an athlete specific program. And more of them do the same things I'm talking about, where you are getting exposed to, of course, hopefully warm-ups that are varied and totally different than you're used to, which is exploring a lot of different movement options, as well as also getting you in a weight room that maybe is doing different lifts. This, of course, is an option that costs money, right? So I hate to give that as a solution, but yeah, outside of that, of course, playing some pickup hoops, you've got to, yeah, keep your love of the game. That's what you don't want, is for aspects of your practice to start stifling your love of the game. And
Yeah.
my wife was a Chinese volleyball player for decades, and she went to two Olympics with the Chinese volleyball team. She has zero love of volleyball. You
Mm.
cannot pay her to watch volleyball. She doesn't even want to watch volleyball on TV. They've
Yeah.
taken all of the fun out of this wonderful sport for her.
Yeah.
So that's what you don't want.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, what do you think is something that we haven't maybe spoken about today or you want to dive into deeper that is going to help like my demographic, which is listening to this, either the youth athletes or the coaches or the parents? Like, what is something that we should talk about for the last few minutes here?
Oh, what a great open-ended question that is. I think, yeah, I love that we already talked about the importance of gamifying like the
Hmm.
training and trying to find ways to make variety within what is essentially skills that need to be kind of practiced routinely. But there's a broader concept of kind of practicing single skills that are outside, it's like when you were in volleyball, like I'm sure you lined up in a line and somebody just soft tossed a ball to your forearms and you passed it back to them to learn how to bump a volleyball.
Hmm.
And and that's and same with setting. You would just practice setting in isolation over and over again. Set 100 balls against the wall, get your fingers, get all that right. And there's a growing body of research that shows that instead of that, if you just have the athletes play a terrible version of volleyball that slowly evolves in its scope and its rules. Like, oh, they're allowed to catch the ball at first. They're allowed to just do the fun part. This is catching the ball, and then you get to throw it to yourself and overhead spike it back over the net. Like there's a big problem and this is just volleyball, but you can imagine in other sports, right? Like if dribbling is really hard for a youth basketball player, take dribbling out of basketball for a while and have them just run with the ball under their arm and do the fun part, which is shoot into hopefully a very low hoop that they're
Mm-hmm.
able to actually be successful. And that instead of practicing all of these skills in isolation and trying to make them look perfect in very clinical or very sterile environments, that we just allow practices to be messier. As coaches, I know that as a young coach, I did not want my practices, my workouts with young athletes to look messy. I didn't want to look like that I didn't have full control. So I wanted my young athletes almost looking like a little militia out there. Parents would give me their 10-year-olds and they would see me as a fresh-faced young coach. They'd be like, there's no way this guy can handle my kids. No way he can handle 7 of these kids. No way. And I was so good at having them like look like a little Marine unit, everyone moving in sync. We had walking lunge to knee hug, and they were terrific. And I was so good and I could make it a little bit fun, but I didn't want it to look like chaotic. And I think I was probably doing my athletes a disservice. That I probably would have made them better athletes if I'd allowed more time for free play, even though it might have looked crazy, because I think that's where they'd probably develop more skills. Like, for instance, all of the little agility ladder, agility hurdle drills that you can buy at any sporting goods store, right, that purport to teach agility, those are all very artificial because you're not reacting to another human coming at you and you're not having to actually make decisions and problem solve. You're just learning a pattern and doing it with your feet. That if we can divorce ourselves from having to look good as a coach to allow things to be messier, I think we'll get a lot more out of our young athletes if we just allow them to not take away the importance of the perception before the action, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
100%. And actually, while you were saying that, I just was reminded of one of the parents they're coming into the program right now, actually, and how she reached out to me was talking about her volleyball player. She's 15, and how in practice she is like a dynamite player, like 100% dynamite, and they scrimmage and she's like queen of the court and like, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And then comes a game and she just can't do it, like crumbles, falls apart. And there's just like a confusion around, why is that happening? And, you know, the mom is saying that practices are just, they focus a lot on games. Like, and so they're just doing scrimmages and, really trying to practice that. And it's interesting because, there's a lot of mental blocks in that,
Hmm.
why she's falling apart in games, but also the practices sound so structured. They sound
Hmm.
so structured and there's nothing really on the line. It's just practicing having a game and it's fun and it's practice. But, if a coach starts implementing the types of exercises you're talking about and fumbling around in practice and taking risks and, all of these gamifications and all this kind of stuff, then all of a sudden you're building the confidence in that player. And I believe that it's going to show up differently when game time comes.
Yeah, yeah. Find ways to make stakes, right? If your athletes are not good with pressure,
Hmm.
find ways to manufacture pressure in a practice, like have there be
Hmm.
stakes. I often get into conversations with coaches about how, losing a game, you shouldn't make them run lines or things like that, but they're like, have there be a result of losing so that you are stressed out about.
Hmm.
So in practice, you get used to being on the back line, being like, okay, if I
Yeah.
blow this serve, my whole team has to break dance in front of their team for 30 seconds. I really don't want to break dance in front of the team for 30 seconds. I don't want to have to get on a knee and serenade them for 30 seconds. Like all of that's embarrassing. So let me dial this in. Let me practice making a hard serve under pressure.
Hmm.
There's ways to manufacture pressure in fun ways that don't single anybody out, but there's no avoiding pressure, right? So it's a mistake to also say we don't want to ever put pressure on one poor kid that's at the back
Yeah.
service line. You need that. That's sport. That's one of the things we love about sport is that we can be forged into better athletes
Yeah.
if we can, run that gauntlet.
Yeah. I wish that my coach had made us break dance. Oh my gosh. He was the runner. If we missed any serves or like down however many points we lost by or whatever, we'd be just running.
Oh
We were
yeah,
very
I know.
conditioned. We were very conditioned.
Yeah, yep, yep. I know
Oh
that. I've
man.
been to many of those practice. I've had to endure watching my athletes do a lot of terrible push-ups. And
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
always interested when I see coaches that do it better.
Right? Yeah, totally. Rhett, thank you so much for taking time with me today. Is there anything else that we should talk about before this ends that we haven't talked about yet?
No, I think this was great.
Right? We
I
covered
know
so
that
much.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you should absolutely, if you're kind of having a hard time visualizing how I do this with my athletes, you can go to my Instagram page and see a ton of examples. But this year, actually, I stopped being lazy and I responded to all the people that asked me, could you put all of your ideas in one place?
Yeah.
And so from my Instagram bio, you could actually see that I've created this big video library that's like a Netflix style thing where I have 500 some ideas, and that library grows every single week as I keep putting new ideas into it that you can search and sort by, if you're looking to enhance speed, or if you have pool noodles, or if you have access to tennis balls, you can sort by all the ideas I've ever thought to come up with for tennis ball warm-ups, something like that. So if you're just worried about not having the creativity, don't worry, I'm not that creative either. I've just stolen and curated for decades all the best ideas that I've come across. So that's the last thing I'd mention. Thank you for
Yeah.
giving me the chance to say that.
Oh, of course, 100%. And I will have yeah, I'll have links to everything in the podcast description. And I just, yeah, thank you. Thank you for being somebody who is creative, sees where you can be innovative and really bring joy back to sport and to strength and conditioning. And that's super important for like the all the generations to come of athletes. How cool is it that here you are, you're on the precipice of making great impact so that all the other athletes don't have to go through the same, 20 drills that we all did, right? So thank you.
I, I feel like the National Jumping Jack Coalition is going to come after me. Like I've really just, for whatever reason, been bad mouthing him on this podcast more than usual. I don't know why I chose that as my.
I'll let you know if they reach out.
Yeah, right. I don't think there's a big lobby for jumping jacks in this world, but we'll find out.
Oh man. Okay, everybody. Until next time, train your mind, build your grit, and forge your legacy.